Austin, so would you grab those doors for a second?
Yep.
I'll give you extra credit for this. Wait a second.
She's not in this class. Get rid of her. Kick her out.
Get out of here. I see Monty stuff, but I do not see Monty. Who else are we missing?
Dylan.
Yep. Dylan, Chashar, Nehemiah.
That's true.
And who else? And Chashar.
He's probably coming.
Just in case you forgot, he's got his name tag wrong. So. Chashar, I would like a loan, please, sir. I'd like a loan, please. A loan. I'd like to borrow money from your institution.
Oh, please.
Set up an account.
You get cut when you
I
get cut
don't.
loans, like commissions.
Sell loans.
A little bit.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, just to get us started here. So next week will be the start of our Build a Cult thing that will be presentations, which should be fun. On remember bonus points for the more people that you swindle into joining your group, and bonus points if it's funny. So you can see all the specifications for that on Popularly. Yes.
Do you lose points if you get swindled into joining a different group?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So the specifications for that assignment are on Popularly. So it should be listed under your assignments page, so you can go ahead and start working on that. And then what we will do today is we will divide up into, I think it works out where there's a few teams of 3 and there's a team of 4, or 2 teams of 2. So it could be like 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, right, or 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, whatever, until we get to the right number. So, so yeah, Dylan, Nehemiah, sounds like they're on a team. So, you guys why don't you let's take 2 minutes and self-organize yourself. So teams of 3, a couple teams of 2, or a team of 4. I'm looking for whatever.
What? Do you just want to be a team of 2? Or team of 3? I'm down with that. That works.
And then, oh wait, I didn't even notice that over there.
Which team?
What teams are there?
I have no idea.
It's
Those three.
Yo, you guys be good if I join you, Ivan? You're good?
We have
No,
3, so I don't know if we can do, if we can do 2 to 4.
Oh, Dylan and Nehemiah.
Dylan, Nehemiah.
Are
We
there
can make a call.
just groups of 3 going on then?
Yeah.
Currently, we're doing groups of 3 until not specified otherwise.
So I already 3 or 4.
You wanna do it with me?
I'll be
And
up
the
for
babies
mine
can be a
and,
part of the
You
team
gonna do it?
too.
Okay, so now it's just us.
I'll make exceptions
I
on the
think,
roster
yeah,
for the
you
babies.
2 and then I'll go with you.
I don't want.
So do we figure it all out? We get it all.
Okay, what do we
At
got?
that point, shouldn't we just do
You got?
3, 3,
Okay.
3, 3 instead of the 2?
I don't know.
And Lexi, Bianca.
Because remember, Nehemiah and Dylan.
Plus who?
Plus babies.
Plus both babies?
Yeah.
Elias.
Well, that's a 5-person group.
No, that's gotta
We
be
need
something.
them.
That's gotta be like minus 4.
Okay. You guys have a team name.
What's her team name?
The Werewolves.
The ladies called.
The Ladies Cult.
I'm already swindling into you guys.
I'll assign you a team name, don't worry. Okay, who else has a team? You guys are the Werewolves. The babies are the werewolves. Okay, who's the next?
That's just like.
Brett, Thomas, and myself.
Bob, Ivan, and Thomas. You guys are the Frankensteins.
Dang it.
Okay,
Frankenstein or his mom.
who's next?
I'm with Dylan and
I'll
Nehemiah.
do this one.
You self-appointed here?
Yeah, apparently.
Dylan,
I'm the one too.
and okay, your team name
Oh, she's
is
going with
the
Dylan.
Tide
Yeah.
Fighters.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then,
Oh, they get a cool name? I have to be.
Yeah, okay, who's next?
I'm with them too.
Is Frankenstein not Sean?
Four.
Yeah. And then,
Did you pick it, Ivan?
because I'm trying to like, think about that. Because then there's
No, that makes sense.
I don't organize.
Okay, who
I
else?
just don't think you want me on your team, Ivan.
No, don't even say that.
I just think.
Don't even say that.
What?
Okay.
You're gonna break my little heart.
Okay, Caleb's with them.
Caleb's with us.
Caleb, Brett, Mom, Ivan, okay. Eli and
Hey, just try. Do you have their all
the
the numbers?
Golden
Do
Unicorn.
you want to make a
I have the messengers.
Yeah, could you make a
I can do that.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. key for biblical presentations. Okay, so I will leave, the way that you do this largely up to your discretion. Obviously get together, go through the specs on popularly. This should be fun, creative. I do want you to think about think about the hooks of cults. And what I mean by hooks are, what are the things that do actually draw people into them? What are the things that we're noticing within cults that draw people in the way that they're structured? We'll get into more of that the farther we go along, right? As we study specifically. Really, in some ways, this first section, though we covered Mormonism last week, this first section is about animistic religions. So, which I'll talk about that today more. But some of the other religions and cults that we will get into have obviously way different hierarchies and structures. Animistic cultures are not typically incredibly well organized. Though, and what I mean by that is they're dark. You won't find like an encyclopedia of, unless somebody came along and did it, like they did it for some college project, right? You're not going to find like a systematic theology of Voodoo or Santeria. Like some of the stuff just exists, interestingly, as word of mouth. So, okay. So you have to take some of that into consideration, and it will probably get easier the further we go along in class. Okay, all right. So what did we talk about yesterday? Just spitball. What did we talk about yesterday?
Talk about voodoo.
We did talk about voodoo.
The history of where it came from, how it mixed with Catholicism in specifically southern North America, is
Okay, talk me through a little bit of it. You were there at the end, but just talk me through. We could talk through it together. Let's just chat. Let's get the chat going. Where did it come from?
West Africa.
West Africa, right? What's that?
Continental slave.
That's right. Yeah, transatlantic slave trade.
Was there something like African diaspora? Was the name? The like, coast part. Millions and millions coming.
West Indies?
The little split islands of Honduras and Haiti.
Haiti?
That you couldn't figure out which was which spot.
I can't remember if Hispaniola is Puerto Rico. I think it's Puerto Rico. Yeah. West side, Haiti, east side, Dominican Republic, right? What else do we remember from yesterday?
comes from like a blend of Catholicism and then Western African religious beliefs, because when they were sent on the slave trade to Haiti, they were like, everyone taught them Catholicism, but then they didn't give them a leader when they got there, so they were just kind of like, I don't know what to do now, so we'll just do what we know and try to figure everything out.
Yeah, like almost 200 years of that.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Right, so we're kind of Catholic, we're kind of traditional African animism, right? And then, yeah, so that's a huge factor, right? Huge factor. So it would even say, like, in the absence of discipleship, you know, in the absence of catechism, in the case of the Catholic Church. I don't know what catechism was like 200 years back then, but something was happening, or not happening in the case of the Haitians. Anything else? Any other big points?
We talked about how there's like recognizing the spirit, like that all humans have a propensity to do that, and so that's one of the points of connection.
Yeah.
And we talked about Jordy.
About Jordy a little bit. Yes, we sure did. Yeah, about how to make it practical, how to do ministry among people that come out of these traditions, right? So, okay, good. So we're gonna take this a little bit further today. Today I'm gonna talk about candomblé, which is the Brazilian version of some of this stuff, and then we're actually gonna get into Native American religion. So this is good. I'm learning right alongside you guys and enjoying it. So, okay, so candomblé, which sounds like candomblé and looks like this. Domblé, which I assume is Portuguese. It's also a syncretistic blend of West African spiritualism, Brazilian cults, Roman Catholicism, and even European culture.
That's a lot.
Whoa. Hello.
That's a lot. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
Sure. West African spiritualism, Brazilian cult, Roman Catholicism, and European culture.
Thank you.
Yeah. So much like voodoo religion in the Caribbean, this Brazilian sort of melting pot amalgamation Also centers on animal sacrifice, on different offerings to the deities, various deities, and also dancing, which is interesting. So I was listening to a go-go music on YouTube, and I hope I wasn't conjuring anything, but it sounded good. So it retains, Candomblé, by contrast with the Yoruba traditions, this retains a bit more of its African flavor. So instead of rituals being held in a temple specifically, these rituals are primarily held outdoors. And so they start with prayer to a specific deity, and then they move into several other deities. The ceremonies do center around a temple, though they take place outside, and they're overseen by a priest called a Babalao, B-A-B-A-L-A-O, and that priest could be either male or female. Okay? What's that?
I was talking to myself. I said how forward.
How forward? So Babalao priests only preside over a small number of people at a time. Initiation rites into this cult are intense and lengthy, and they can range from several months to several years. Initiates into this cult must shave their heads and live in solitude and not speak to anybody for up to years at a time. Their clothes are washed in the blood of animal sacrifices, which is super fun. And their body is eventually filled with cultic tattoos. At this point, the initiate is given a new name. Do we see new names being given to anybody in Scripture?
My goodness.
It's interesting. Betrayal of these secrets can involve retribution from the spirits, or they can actually, or how about they say, outsiders attempting to intrude into the mysteries of this cult actually can be killed. So they're closely guarded secrets. So Candomblé is an animistic religion. So I want you to write this down, and you need to learn this. Animism or animistic would be obviously the adjective form of it. Animistic religion. This comes from the Latin anima, which means breath, life, spirit. It actually is easy to remember for you Greek students because anima sounds like this Greek word. Anybody know what that is?
Yeah.
Right. Pneuma, anima, pneuma. Some people think that they are related. I don't know. But same exact definition. Pneuma, breath. Depends on the context. Spirit, life, right? Same thing for anima. So animism, the main principle of animistic religions, which don't think of animism as a religion, but just a worldview, underneath which certain religions exist. Okay. So animistic religions don't distinguish between what we call like God and creation. And what I mean by that is all things in the universe, and even in some cases in Candomblé, words, which is kind of a wild thought, are they possess a life force, a soul, or a mind. So this idea that everything is connected to a life force, which sounds like Yoda, right? That's sort of a subset of animism called pantheism. So this idea that we all share the same life force is called pantheism, but that's not necessarily a characteristic of animistic religions, okay? Pan, meaning all, okay? The, or theo, God. Ism, right? Religion, or ideology. So we're all God, or all connected to God. That's what you see in pantheism. So everything has breath or life in animism. Everything is connected to the same life force in pantheism, but in animism, not everything is connected to the same life force. Okay, so we all have pneuma within us or anima within us in animism, but we're not all necessarily connected to the same thing. We're discrete, separate, not deities, but discrete spirits. Okay, so a religion may be both pantheistic and animistic. So this is opposed to materialism. So on one side of the thing is animism, where everything has meaning and has purpose, right? And on the other end of the continuum, the ideological continuum is materialism, where nothing is anything more than its subsequent parts. We're all atoms. We can be weighed, measured, all that stuff, right? Purely empirical. Okay. Other examples, this is not simply relegated to African religion, of course. Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Shintoism in Japan are all considered animistic religions. Those are found primarily in Asia. So you think about Hinduism revering, the easiest image is like the reverence for cows, right? Or the river Ganges, you know, that river or that specific geographical region can be imbued with purpose and a spirit, right? Yeah.
I did a study on Jainism last, I had a class with Dr. Andrew, and like the most adherents to it, like the highest level of Jains, they like refuse to walk on grass because they'd be killing like the spirit, and they like won't eat food that was like that wasn't someone's non-leftovers.
Oh, wow.
Because otherwise they're killing anything, like any food at
Yeah.
all.
So
Which is just-
deep
yeah, so
reverence
it's like-
for living things,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for adding that. That's great. I'm not an expert in Buddhism. I'm not an expert in world religions, frankly, but in my research, Buddhists revere certain species of trees. And then the example from Eli, you know, just with Jainism right there. Yeah. So basically, if you see any religion that accepts or operates under the worldview that things are not just their substance, but there's spirit behind it, you know, whether it's living, dead, a geographical region, whatever, that may be at least a partially animistic religion. Some people will argue actually that Christianity is an animistic religion. So am I against that? Am I for it? Not necessarily. That's not my rubric for deciding whether or not Christianity is real, right? So what are elements in Christianity from what you know about animism that would be animistic or have animistic leanings?
The way we treat the Bible, maybe?
Interesting.
Like with not wanting it to touch the ground and stuff like that.
Okay.
I guess that's not a word. Living Word of God. Like us calling it the living Word of God, I feel like can throw some people off.
Okay. That's an interesting example, yeah.
Like the idea that God created everything, and he's not necessarily in everything, but he's everywhere all at once. We believe he's like omniscient, omnipresent, like he's always present in every moment and such.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an adjacent, kind of principle. If he's everywhere, then, you know, like my friend said, if God's everywhere, go where the money is, right? So, I'm just kidding. He did say that, but you shouldn't do that. I'm joking. Tishar, don't write that down. I know that you're very thorough, right, Tishar? So don't write that down. Okay. Anything else spring to mind? So if we say animistic or animism, immediately it can be like, well, my job is not to be animistic because animism is other, right? Or there's spirituality that is involved in animism that may sort of imitate certain aspects of Christianity, but that's not our rubric for what we accept as truth. We don't judge Christianity according to what other religions do. We judge it according to what? What? What do we build our doctrines around?
The Bible, like God's truth.
That's right, we build it around Scripture. We build it around the Bible, right? So if there are similarities or differences, that's not my concern in some ways. I'm not trying to be the opposite of animistic. I'm trying to adhere to the Scripture, okay? So I'm not put off by, some people say, like, even Pentecostalism, like, some people will say, hey, Pentecostalism, that sounds like New Age woo-woo. It's like, well, that's not my standard. The book of Acts is my standard for what Pentecostalism is. Does that make sense? Okay? My desire to be like or dislike other religions that doesn't factor in. What's that?
So that's really good, actually. I really thought about it like that. Because I think sometimes I do that.
Yeah.
It's like, I hear like, oh, this religion does that. And I'm almost like quick to be like, no. Because it's our thing. And like, that makes a lot of sense. That's really good.
You can chew on that a bit. So, okay. Zachariah, did you want to?
No, we went past it already. If
We
you want
did.
me to bring it back.
Come on, somebody. Whatever you want to say.
It was going back to the animism and how we can be sometimes mistaken for it. Is taken to the book of Acts where they come to the council where they specifically bring up don't eat strangled meat. So there's the also don't drink blood or eat blood because it has the life force in it, and that sometimes is connected to specifically voodoo. When they say animal sacrifice, it's not they don't like to say sacrifice, but instead they're asking the animal if they can treat it well to be gifted to the gods.
Yeah.
So it's just that respect of the animals as they would have put it in the council to respect the animal and give it a peaceful death, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I think you make an interesting point. Okay, so there's two regulations that make it through. So Paul is refuting the Judaizers who say that basically. Can somebody look this up real fast on your computer devices where this is? Because I can't remember off the top of my head. So Paul's in an argument, right? Paul's saying, hey, you're saved by grace. You don't have to become a Jew in order to become a Christian, right? That was one of the big arguments of the New Testament, right? That's a big, obviously, part of our theology, our doctrine, too. Like, you don't have to be a Jew that converts to Christianity. You don't have to observe the law. Christ fulfilled the law. So what is important out of that, right? Everybody got together, and they said that there are two things, and they're interesting because these do pop up in the Yoruba religions, or the animistic religions, and Voodoo religions specifically. So eating blood sacrificed to animals, or eating anything that's been sacrificed.
It's eating strangled animals and eating blood.
Okay.
And then there's also the sacrifice to idols that gets added on.
Sacrifice to idols, that's the one I remember. And then what's the other regulation that they give?
The other regulation,
It's abstain from sexual.
yeah, sexual immorality.
Okay, so don't eat animals that are sacrificed, okay? And then don't have sex with people you're not supposed to have sex with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so have you found out what passage is that?
That's in Acts 15.
Acts 15. I thought it was in the epistles. Go ahead. Just read it out, just that section, as much as you think is appropriate.
I'm trying to find. Oh, here it is. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Instead, we should write to them, telling them to abstain from blood polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood. For the law of Moses has been preached in every city from the earliest times and is read in the synagogues on every Sabbath.
Okay, so he's saying this is going to go through the cross into our thing, right? It's saying like, hey, everybody should know about this because the law of Moses has been preached enough that we're going to make this a little bit easier for the you and me. Anybody in here Jewish? Are you Jewish?
1%.
That's amazing. That's probably Jewish?
Yeah.
You're the elder brothers. You guys get a double portion. So I know, Scott's Irish. So interesting. Let's not make it harder on everybody than we need to. But interestingly, these things pop up in some of these religions, right? So you read about the way that, I hate even saying this stuff out loud. So like the high voodoo, cover those babies' ears. I'm not saying it. So there is animal sacrifices, and there's also sacrifices of other things that are more horrific, that are consumed in some of these rituals. Like I said, it's dark stuff. I don't even like saying it out loud. And then there's also in some of the culture, voodoo culture and stuff like that, there's like orgies and like different things like that. And like, yeah, they're deeply spiritual things, right? Connections to blood. Do I have a full like theology about this stuff? I don't, frankly. There's also theology about, I heard somebody say this way, if you want to get mixed up with the demonic, there are a few main ways: occult practices, hallucinogenic drugs, and sexual immorality. If you want to get mixed up with demonic forces, there's 3 pathways, okay? And a lot of this stuff centers around those practices, which we'll talk about peyote culture and Native American stuff a little bit later. So, okay, are we cooking? Doing good? Yes. Okay, so not to be left out, the Europeans, right? Animism exists in mythology and in actual pagan spirituality in Europe. You're going to love this. My name, Payne, actually is the original Latin form of Payne is pagan. So the story goes that somebody in my lineage was not as devoted to the church as they should have been. So they started calling him John the Pagan or whatever. And then eventually it just became the last name, kind of anglicized and became Payne.
So you're Matt Pagan?
Literally. Yeah. So, anyways, which I'm like, I'm not a super religious person. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, I love Jesus, but it's like, let's not make more rules than we have to make, you know? This is kind of part of my ethos. So, I wear it proudly. Praise God. So, a lot of times in Europe, paganism would exist in like tree worship or nature worship. For all the Estonian team, let's go Estonian. All the Estonian people, they're deeply spiritual, and from what I didn't observe this, but from what we learned, like people would go into nature to commune with the Spirit, right? So there's, I don't know if it's actual worship or just sitting there feeling the vibes, like doing the thing, you know? But it's deeply spiritual, it may look a little different. So actually Celtic animism, which is my heritage, there's a concept in Celtic animism or Celtic pagan spirituality and even Catholic spirituality that kind of mixed together, which talks about thin places. This is a fascinating concept to me. So places or moments in time when people say that the veil between the spiritual and the physical is said to be thinner than other times and places. So, this is, again, it's a fascinating concept. So, what was it, Jacob's ladder? Like Jacob falls asleep and he sees a portal between heaven and earth where the angels are ascending and descending, you know? I think that could be a form of that. I know that some of this is like semi-Christian mythology, but honestly there may be something to it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to build a doctrine on thin places, but I think it's a fascinating concept. I have walked into church services like where it's just like, whoa, like even to the point of having to sit because the weighty presence of the Lord was so, like the kabod, like the weighty glory of the Lord was so present that I just had to sit down and shut up, let my words be few. Would I consider that a thin place? I don't know what I'd call it. I just know what I felt, right? I knew that the Lord was near, and Lord, forgive me of all my sins, one of those moments. I would also say some examples in Scripture for this could be Exodus 19, when there's thunder and lightning and a thick cloud on Mount Sinai, and God is giving an invitation for the people to come up, and they said, no, Moses, you go. We'll stay here. That guy's dead meat. You know what I mean? So that's a place where God came, right? The tabernacle in Exodus 40 is also an example. The people, or that said the glory would fill, the place. 1 Kings 8:10 says that when the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could no longer perform their service there because the cloud was so thick that the glory of the Lord had actually filled the temple. So there's the idea that, God does. Okay? So, and in the New Testament, if you need an example, I think just the miraculous sign of tongues of fire, the rushing mighty wind in the book of Acts, right? Filling the upper room where people were gathered. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. So okay, so that's candomblé and just a kind of an overview of animistic religions or animism in general, just sort of as a worldview. So, anybody have any questions? All right, good stuff. Let's press on. There is another religion worth mentioning. You'll remember the Yoruba people typically participated in Santeria, but another ethno-linguistic group from Africa called the Bantu people, and that is central. That is located in anything below the Sahara Desert, sub-Saharan Africa, below Sahara. If you can visualize that. So some of the Bantu languages that you may have heard of are Swahili, or Xhosa, Xhosa, and Zulu. So many of the deities are shared between Yorubic and Bantu religion, and many of the practices are the same. So there's kind of Bantu and Yorubic versions of this stuff. I don't expect you to remember all that. Just know that some of that exists, and there's some minor differences. But let's press on. So, okay, let's talk about Native American religion. Anybody in here Native American? Okay. Yes. I have some Native American ancestry. So obviously, I learned this, that there are over 300 tribes, distinct tribes in North America and Central America. So the first conversation we have to have is it's really problematic to lump everything together. Okay. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some big picture trends that do occur within Native American spirituality. So, though there has been some Native American and Catholic syncretism that has taken place, most of the beliefs that still happen, right, are rooted in pre-Christian practices of religion, right, before the Europeans showed up. in the Americas and started having a big impact on culture. So Native American religions are primarily animistic. So everything has a spirit, soul, a life within it. And that all of creation has a spiritual life force associated with it. Different tribes give this force, this life force, all sorts of different names, too many to go through. So an example of the way that life force would show up in certain tribes is like this. If, let's say, an Iroquois, this was in the encyclopedia, so if an Iroquois hunter is hunting a deer and was able to take that deer, right, harvest that deer, it's because they had more life force or more good force in them built up than the deer, okay? And that, in the case of the Iroquois, would be called orinda, or life force. So the opposite true is if the hunt failed, okay? So then the deer would have had more life force than it. So that obviously determines probably the way that hierarchies are established, like when you take a bigger look at society, and maybe how people are able to obtain more life force. Maybe it's through ritual, maybe it's through moralism, maybe it's through all sorts of stuff. So some tribes, like the Lakota, recognize the supreme creator deity, while others do not. So there's some difference there. So Plains tribes practice what's called the Sundance. Has anybody ever heard of Sundance? Besides the Sundance Film Festival? So, which is now outlawed since 1860, 1880, somewhere in there. So in a Sundance, a young man would actually pierce their pectoral muscles and would attach themselves to a pole. This would be in spring, right? And for 3 or 4 days, they would have to, without food, water, or comfort, they would have to stay there and like dance. And so the ritual would be over actually when the skewers that were holding them with leather ropes to the pole would actually pull out of their chest and rip their flesh open, and then they would be allowed to. Somebody to come and restore them to health. But at some point in that, it was often that people would have hallucinations, which is like, yeah, their brain's in full damage control. You know what I mean? So release of, all sorts of chemicals and stuff. So, and to some tribes, the hallucinations that took place during the Sundance would be seen as sacred revelation. Okay? And that ceremony, and this is pretty common in Native American religion, that ceremony was presided over by a medicine man or a shaman. The shaman or medicine man is actually a common concept in different Native American tribes and their practices. The shaman will lead groups in dances. Does that sound familiar? And use incantations to ward off evil spirits or bring good luck. Does that sound familiar too? The shaman was also often an herbalist who would prescribe different herbal treatments. You guys run herbalists? Like, you have an herbalist class? Okay. So, who prescribed treatments for illnesses, which did produce good effects. And famously, aspirin was made from the bark of a willow tree, which I think has its roots in Native American medicine. It's pretty awesome. Some Native American tribes practice what's called totemism. So you've heard of totem poles, right? In which the bond between man and animal is celebrated. There you go, sis. Is celebrated, if not actually like worshipped or venerated. Tribes or clans would adopt specific animals as its totems, often a fox, bear, eagle, bison, and would honor that animal to the point of their refusing to touch in certain cases, or kill that animal to eat, except in self-defense. You can kill the bears if the bear charges you. So, or in a very specific ritual where they'd be like, this is the one time a year or whatever that we eat the flesh of this animal. So there's a fascinating line in the encyclopedia where Emil Durkheim, does anybody know the name? Emil, yeah, Eli, go ahead.
Can you just define venerate quick? It's like bring to a place of worship? Is that what it means?
Yeah, somebody look at venerate. So venerate. So venerate would be just like to celebrate as other, like more higher, holy, maybe not quite at the level of a deity, but what does the internet say?
Venerate something or someone, whether an artist or a saint, is to hold them in similarly high regard, which makes sense given venerate's origins, is what it says.
Celebrate, honor, raise up. I try to guess exactly what the internet's going to say when I do things. So here's a fascinating line. So Emil Durkheim, who, the only thing I know about him is he died during the First World War, not probably in combat, but Emil Durkheim studied Native American religions enough to make a pretty fascinating observation. If a specific tribe was totemic or totemist, then they were I made that up, I don't know if that's actually a word. If the tribe had totems, whatever you would call that, was represented by an animal and the tribe worshipped that animal, Durkheim was suggesting that actually they were worshiping themselves. So let's say if I was represented by, this is gonna sound so stupid, I'm not gonna say Dallas Cowboys, we're gonna say an animal, right? Or if this class was represented by an animal, we say we're the fox class or whatever. And we have a fox icon and we worship that icon. Durkheim was suggesting psychologically, sociologically, we're actually worshiping ourselves. Okay? I think that's a really interesting concept. It kind of teaches us something. So actually, the social force or the cultural force of the group became God, so to speak. Does that make sense? So the unity of the culture, the strength of the culture, that was celebrated as a force that existed outside of, it's more than the sum of its parts, you know? So I think we see this in America is like deep patriotism, even to the point of nationalism or inappropriate nationalism or jingoism is another word that you'll run across. Ivan, you want to talk us through jingoism? Are you playing video games?
No, I'm writing down ideas for the cult thing.
I love it. So, I'm messing with you. So, do you want to talk us through jingoism?
I'm not familiar.
Somebody look it up on the internet. Jingoism. Jingoism.
Extreme patriotism, especially in the form of aggressive or warlike foreign policy.
That's a great word for you guys. Okay, so if people are overly devoted even to a nation nation becomes a symbol, right? In some ways, people worship the nation to that point, right? Then, in some ways, that's a way of what Durkheim was saying is that's a way of people worshiping themselves. That the nation becomes the social force. It's a social force. It's a social contract between people, right? It's an agreement to in some cases to say like we don't care what other people think. Like we're going to do whatever's best for us and not try to establish mutually beneficial relationships with other people groups. And this could happen between two people. I love the old Bedouin proverb says, I against my brother and I against my cousins and I against the world. He's talking about tribalism. There's concentric circles of unity, and it's always you against somebody else, you know? It's like, all right, me and Maggie against the world, you know? Interesting concept. So the social force of a clan or a group becomes the group's representation of God, which makes it, in a sense, a spiritual force. It's not a physical force, it's an ideological force. In some ways, that society, that's saying that society has created God, or the collective identity of a group is God, in a way. Durkheim actually went a bit further. And he said that religion is not a social phenomenon. Actually, society is a religious phenomenon, meaning that in religion, society worships itself. I think it's kind of fascinating. So do you think that there are ever cases when the church worships itself?
Yes.
Well, that was easy and quick. I'm going to make you explain why. Why you think that? You think the church ever worships itself?
Well, look at Catholic tradition that isn't found in the Bible or sacred text.
Talk me through it.
Well, if we're taking that and putting it to what we always do, you're simply worshiping your past and not God's past, in a sense.
Good point. Papal authority, maybe? Go ahead.
Now, I hope it's not controversial for you, but like in America with the church, like really honoring freedom and having the freedom to worship, I guess it sometimes can become like a worship of like really fighting for that freedom to worship, especially since like throughout history we've seen the church being oppressed, even thriving under oppression.
Yeah. That's good. There's a line to maintain there, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. Anybody else? Instances when the church is worshiping itself and not worshiping Jesus, maybe?
mine's less specific, but just more conceptually. Like feel a lot of times like active churchgoers often find themselves like almost scoffing at those who leave church, just because they're like, well, I attend church every Sunday, so it's like the idea of church is somehow makes you better than those who don't. Like maybe it makes you a little bit more like farther along, but like I don't know. It feels like off after hearing their two very good examples. But that's what I was understanding. But like people who go to church think they're better than,
Sure.
essentially, and almost exalt themselves.
So maybe in that case, people are using church as a social hierarchy,
Yeah.
you know?
As an excuse to venerate themselves.
Venerate,
Mm.
well done.
Mm.
They're venerating themselves by saying, I dress a certain way, I don't have, I abstain from, I got you, I abstain from certain sins that may or may not be socially acceptable, whatever.
It's like the idea, like, you know, like when it's like a church, and it's like churches, some churches, their culture is like, they talk about like how you can't be gay, you can't cuss, you can't do all these things. But then they're like, when it's like, oh, the Bible says gluttony's a sin, and their 400-pound pastor is like, kind of decides this thing, and then they go to the church potluck, the 17 church potluck. And it's kind of like they excuse certain things because they think they're above it, because they don't do the other stuff.
Wow,
Come on, man.
I don't know.
come on now. Turn the order on.
That's
Yes,
what I was gonna say.
exactly what he was gonna say.
Pretty much. Like how people in the church will be like, oh, we don't want the gay people here, but then they'll go home and practice things like watching porn, or gluttony, just other sins that like they're listed in the same places. It says do not be gay. It says do not overeat, do not be sexually immoral.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good word, yeah, Bianca.
I think how structural the church can be at times also plays into like we worship ourselves rather than God, because it's kind of like doing things for God but not with God.
Mm.
Like we'll make sure everything is like you have this much time to do this much time. And I guess what I'm getting at is just like not leaving enough room for the Spirit and putting our own humanness on it and being like the Spirit's gonna move in this time or this time. But like He works sovereignly, so we're trying to control something we can't.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we can all think of a personal worship team or a pastor, or maybe you can't, and that's very good, who's been like, yeah, I did so good. And like, yeah, I'm doing so much for the church. Or like, this like obsession with work that some pastors get, of just like, the success of their church becomes like, the fiscal or like reach of their church becomes more important than actually spreading the gospel. So they're just like doing watered down gospel, which is like, oh, we fed 5,000 people today and told nobody about Christ.
Wow.
And we're just functioning as like a good functioning, like a good piece of society,
Yeah.
but we aren't actually spreading Christ's message. You know?
Yeah. Remember, I got in a pretty heated argument with one of my grad school professors. Nobody that works here, don't worry. He was talking about, we were talking about that very thing. He was like, we shouldn't always have to, you know, share the gospel when we do like outreaches to people and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't mind feeding people, but I said, why would you take care of the physical at the expense of the spiritual and the eternal? You know, it's like you can do both. If you can just feed people, then feed people, but feed them and give them the gospel, right? And on the counterpoint of that is there's such a thing as rush Christianity, right? Where the only reason people, it's like, sign me up for whatever, I haven't eaten in weeks, my children are starving, and I'll convert to whatever you want me to convert to if you just give me that bag of food over there.
Yeah.
Okay? So it has to be held in intentional tension, right? Be really careful about that stuff. It's like, for Pete's sake, just give people food. I agree with that, right? But give the gospel, man. Tell them what Jesus did for them, you know?
There's like the triangle, like the hierarchy of needs things that like churches will base off of. Like some churches start with outreach, strictly like food outreach, and then like move up to like spiritual, and then some are like the opposite where it's like, well, I'm just gonna pray. Essentially what you said, but isn't there like a thing about that, like a hierarchy of needs triangle thing?
You mean like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like
not
food,
some
water,
kind of-
shelter, like, you know, community, safety, like security, whatever, and then the tip of the northern tip, so to speak, of the triangle is self-actualization,
Yeah.
where it's like you have purpose, like you're fulfilling what you're supposed to be fulfilling. I mean, church, we live in that world to some degree, you know? And we tell people your highest purpose, even in some ways above self-actualization, is self-sacrifice. It's like you can get your degree and do your thing, like do whatever you want, but like Jesus actually takes it a step further than that, where you lay down your life for the people around you, and that's your highest form you've attained to some sort of like spiritual, where you're serving others. Like so Maslow plus whatever's above Maslow.
That's who did it, the Maslow's hierarchy. I don't know, you're smart.
Smart people say things now. Ready, go.
Things now.
Things now. Come on. Okay. Do we think the church worships itself? It can. Yeah, I love that. I love that. There's a balance between the organic and the institutional that we always live in all things. So the best I think when church is at its best, it balances institutional life. You guys have chapel 4 times a week. I don't know if you know that or not, but you guys have chapel 4 times a week. Love you, bro. Just messing with you. I go once a week maybe. So
Wow.
yeah, no comment. So when I'm mixing on Wednesdays, or Dark Paul speaking, I have to be there. There is a balance between the institutional and the organic, right? Spirit-led nature of it, right? And that's okay, because that's human nature, you know? We've got bones and muscles. We've got spirit within us, right? We've also got an intellect. Like God has given us these things to try to figure out what it is to be human, you know? So church starts on time, you know? Maybe, chapel starts at 9, right? And sometimes it goes long, and that's okay. If the Spirit is moving sovereignly, we say, hey, this is more important than the next thing I have to get to. I would rather encounter Jesus today in this moment when he may be encountered, right? Than go on to hang out with my friends or do whatever, even get ready for class sometimes. And sometimes it's 9:50 and it's time to shut up and move on. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's okay. There's a rhythm and there's a life and there's a tension that we live in, and I think you make a great point. But even the essence of Pentecost from the book of Matt Payne, the heartbeat of Pentecost is that God has the right to interrupt our lives and do whatever he wants to do at any moment and at any time. He dwells within us. He's speaking to us. And that means that, and he's Lord, right? So, all bets are off. Whatever you want to do, Jesus, we're going to say yes to. Okay? Okay, sorry. Okay, other uniquenesses in Native American religion include the use of hallucinogens, psychedelics, specifically peyote, which some Native American Christian syncretists describe, and I would not say this over everybody by any stretch, but there are certain groups that call themselves peyotists, which see peyote as the sacrament within the Native American church. So they said the wine and the bread are for our white brothers, and peyote is for us. So it's just like, okay, interesting. No. But so peyote this is not a how-to, guys. Peyote is brewed in tea, chewed, or eaten, and can produce hallucinogenic, psychedelic visions. Is a good way to say that. Peyotes, interestingly, are forbidden from drinking alcohol. The use of psychedelics in general is controversial. Nixon passed the Controlled Substances Act in 1970, pushed that through to ward off the evil hippie spirits in San Francisco. That was a joke. No? Nobody? Don't laugh. Okay, sorry. Ward off the evil hippie spirits, anybody? Okay, forget it. So, U.S. v. Boyle in 1991 allowed for tribes to use peyote in rituals and worship. So, if you're a peyotist in a Native American religion, it's actually legal to use peyote. You can transport it, use it, cultivate it, all that stuff. So, many Native American practices include ancestor veneration, which closely aligns with Bantu and Yoruba traditions. So what are some of the things from Native American culture that you see are common to some of the West African practices?
Ancestral worship?
Ancestral worship, was that that felt like there was a question mark on the end of that.
No, I was thinking about it.
Okay. Ancestral worship? You know? What are you having for lunch? A ham sandwich? Put the question mark on there. That's funny. Right? Make it a question. Okay. What I say? I got, okay. Ancestral worship. Veneration, if you will. What else? What do Native American practices and West African religions have in common?
Hallucinations, or like attempt to hallucinate in order to see spiritual realm.
What would the example in African religions be? Yeah, go ahead.
I have something other than them. It was the conjuration through dancing / rhythm.
Yep. Hey guys, as somebody who likes to get down, okay, this is not our rubric for whether we're allowed to dance or not, okay? Or even dance in church, frankly. It's worth throwing in. Yeah. Dancing, conjuration. Ivan?
Rites of passage rituals.
Ooh, yeah, initiation rites. Often intense initiation rites. Years of not being able to speak, yeah.
Okay, here's what it says. The Voodoo, which is a religion rooted in West African spiritual traditions, hallucinations, particularly auditory and visual hallucinations, can be understood as a manifestation of spiritual experiences and interactions with Iwa or the spirits.
Okay, yeah. Does it say how they get there or what they do to induce hallucinations?
Possession, or just delusions.
Okay, good times. Yeah, well, not sure how to. Spirit contact? What else? Anything else? Big points? Ladies? Do the babies want to say anything?
Just like the life force.
Yeah, which is common to animism. Like, that's it, right? Either there's life force in everything that's individual, or there's a common life force that everything shares, right? Yoda? Yoda would be pantheistic, animistic critter, you know? What's Yoda's species?
It's not disclosed. He's just
Gremlin.
It's undisclosed.
Yeah, there's only 3 of them in Star Wars canon, so it's just they Yoda, you know?
Yep. Yoda, baby Yoda, and then Yaddle.
Yep.
It's freaking weird because Grogu's not even a baby, he's like 400 years old.
I guess it's relative, right?
Really young. I mean, it's not really, that's not
The
really.
baby?
Well, they're not.
Yeah.
Grogu's not 400.
No, 400.
Grogu's only 50.
Yeah, that's very.
But he's still cute.
Like
He's
Star
still cute.
Wars.
It says 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not that old.
I added a 0, my bad.
Y'all saying 50 not that old is
I
wild.
don't know why I disagreed, just wanted
Yeah,
to.
Yoga was
my
like
bad.
500 in a day. 900?
So that will be on the test. Yoda was a pantheistic animist Yoda, okay?
Great.
And if somebody find a quote from Empire Strikes Back that talks about Yoda's theology, his pantheistic theology. This is fun. We got all these computers in here. They're connected to the internet, you know. And back in my day, we were playing Oregon Trail and Apple IIe. So, praise the Lord. Mormons.
They
What else?
Animal sacrifices.
Hey, there we go.
Okay.
What's the examples in Native American religion of animal sacrifices?
I don't know if they really had a sacrificial thing or just honoring the animal by using everything.
Okay.
The close would it be like, could you
Their
go
totems
to once a year where they eat the
What
animals?
animals?
Represented
That would be the example, yeah, in totemism, yeah, where people would, for certain rituals would eat specific animals for specific ritualistic purposes. Probably stronger in West African culture than something, West African religion. So, let me stand right here. Anything else? So, why, let me ask you this, let's just talk about this from a sociological perspective for a second. You may have any other ones that I'm missing, or does anybody have Yoda's theology?
I have a Yoda thing.
Okay, go.
So I asked ChatGPT, I said, give me a Yoda quote about pantheistic theology. And it basically is like, Yoda doesn't explicitly discuss pantheistic theology in Star Wars, but if he did, it might sound like this. Everywhere the Force is, in
Do
the
the
tree.
voice. Do the voice.
No. Everywhere, I don't know how to do Yoda's voice.
Yeah.
No, everywhere the Force is, in tree and stone, in you it dwells. Separate nothing is, one all things are.
Everywhere the Force is. Entry. And you can drive.
Right.
Yeah. It says these reflect pantheistic ideas, so ChatGPT agrees that he's a pantheistic theology.
The ship, the rock. Right?
That's good Yoda.
It's not bad. Years of anything else? Yoda's pantheistic theology?
Brett's probably the biggest Star Wars fan.
Brettabon, let's go. Give me something. You find examples of Yoda quotes that demonstrate pantheistic theology?
Just use your memory bank, Brett.
There's so much.
There's so much?
There's so many Yoda quotes.
Okay.
Every single Yoda quote ever.
He was in like
He was in so much.
Okay, Matt's board. Just interrupt me. Interrupt me if something comes up, okay, Brett? I give you permission to keep researching that. Okay, let's what else do I want to talk about? Okay, let's back up from this and look at this as sort of a societal thing. Is there anything that comes to mind if I were to say, how could Native American, depending on what you think about Pangean, land bridges across the Aleutian Sea, and all that stuff, like migration patterns and different things, how could a Native American animistic religion really develop some striking similarities with West African animistic religions? Let's just consider, because that's a lot. Rhythmic drums, right? Animistic, everything has spirit meaning, right? Pretty striking similarities. Yeah, Bianca.
I think like everyone like innately wants to know like what's the truth, and so seeing as they're like in completely different parts of the world, they probably open themselves up to like, okay, what is truth? Like something show me. And demons are very good at imitating what God already has, and so they were like, yeah, free open space, maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I think you make some great points. Yeah. What
So
else?
this is said with a question mark.
Yeah.
It's kind of building off that as well.
Just raise your voice at the end.
Both of them also experienced different forms of segregation from traditional society where they were,
Okay.
to the point where they kind of learned from nature, which what I would seemingly then slide into more of what she said, where like there's demonic teaching there, which comes to the same conclusions with that.
Okay. Good. We love that.
Yeah.
Throw that out there for the group.
Yeah, I don't know what segregation like would have to do with it, since these religions are like ancient, and before even they were segregated, like these religions existed.
Not like segregated from in the sense of like different water fountains, but like segregated as in like separated from, just like from the traditional society.
Oh, like Western society? Because like traditional society, like
Kind of.
what does that mean?
There's like the mainstream society, and then there's like they're almost like separated from that. In like, I'm having trouble explaining it, but
Like instead of like
for like how they presented in the Western world now,
okay.
it's like there's like reservations and stuff like that, and like essentially their land was like stolen, and they've been like put into separate spots, so they're experiencing culture differently from. So like, because I know that it's traditional, but like I'm thinking of it in the lens of now presenting in the Western world.
But like, how does that affect like the origin of their religion? Like, because like that could be an explanation of like how it reflects now in society. Like going back thousand-ish years, like I don't know.
And that is why I said with a question mark.
Question mark?
Because that's got me thinking out loud.
Yeah. Let me throw something in there into that mix. Maybe there's some isolationism, you know, for certain. I mean, obviously there's cross-tribal communication in Native American like culture, but depending on what you think about Vikings or Columbus in 1492, right? a lot of that religion appears to have developed in the absence of other influences, specifically like Roman Catholic influence or
They're
whatever,
similar because they're not influenced by the West.
or anybody, not just the
Anybody?
West. Yeah,
Sure.
but something is developing in isolation, sort of on its own.
But I mean,
You know what I
can
mean?
that be said for like nearly everything? Like, I mean, especially going back to as far as these religions are.
That's a good question. I mean, I think that if you look at the way that geography in the West, even to things of like the Roman highway systems, like
Sure.
there's an intense mixture of cultures, you know, and like, I mean, you know, Latin is spoken all over the known world, whatever, like Greek, like is spoken like in all these different places outside of Greece, obviously.
Yeah.
And so there is a huge melting pot
Yeah.
of different things, whereas, and so you're getting a lot of influences. You're getting Plato influencing Christianity,
Sure.
Platonic thought, right? And that's shaping the fathers. It's shaping Paul to a degree. It's shaping all this stuff. And then maybe by contrast, and I don't know, and I'm not making a value statement either. You have these religions that are probably, I mean, my guess, I'm sure there's trade in West Africa, but they may be developing in isolation, and that might just be a part of the thing.
Yeah, because I think like pagans were doing the same thing, and then like in contact
Yeah.
with other like pagan tribes, things evolved. So like it'd be an explanation of like why they've retained this way, I suppose.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. Maybe there's something there. If somebody wants to do a PhD on the way that isolated versus integrated, somewhat integrated society, like high trade, volume of trade, you know, and the way that religion and stuff has developed. I think that there's something there. So
And it could even be not even to the extent of what I said, but almost like instead of it being the foundation of why they are that way, it could just be another thing on the list.
yeah.
That both of those religions turn into a more isolated place. Oh, I wasn't saying put it on there, I was saying.
it's okay. I got it.
Yeah, because what Ivan says is really true.
Question mark.
Ah, yes.
There we go.
Developed in isolation? Maybe. Yeah. Is that correct?
Are we going isolation from other communities? Because I know both of these religions tend to be very community focused on their own community. Like almost all of like voodoo celebration /
Yeah.
services are fully based on community.
Ooh, yeah.
It's
yeah.
a
That's
giant
good point.
party practically.
Yeah.
So in the same way in Native American culture, it's about a party with their community. It's togetherness.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to use a term for this, guys. I'm going to call this high culture or high barrier to entry. So this would be the opposite of seeker friendly. Okay? This would be like you're not a Christian until you go through 3 years of classes and like you're whatever. That would be a high barrier to entry into a community. Whereas other things would be like low barrier to entry into a community. It's like, okay, yeah, just join us. Like whatever. We're just all we're going with the flow and exploring Jesus together. That would be a low barrier to entry thing. Whereas like you got to go through confirmation, right? You got to go through catechesis. You want to be in the club? You got to do 10 years of this. You got to do this. You got to go on a Mormon pilgrimage. Those are high barrier to entry things too. So I like the point that you're making, Zach. Right? Yeah. There are like secret rites and secret cultures where it's very communal on the inside, but you're either in or you're out. Okay. So I would think just looking at the evidence that I would say, well, let's put a question mark on it. So, but yeah, it's definitely possible and very interesting. Okay, did somebody else have their hand raised? What was the question? What do these things have in common with one another? You know?
Yeah. What do they have in common? Why do we think they like? What's like their origin point? Is kind of where it kind of led to.
Yeah, just exploring. Yeah.
I mean, this is not as profound as the last couple that came about, but like I think a lot of these early religions definitely were so focused on stories. And, like I know, especially like Native Americans, like they would like to tell these like life stories using these animals and objects. And I think even these African religions have the same thing. I mean, we have some of it a little bit in the Bible also, but like I feel the Native Americans really drove home this idea of like they use like these animals or something to tell like a life story and such. And
Yeah. Okay, we'll put a question mark behind that too. We're gonna need a PhD to explain some of this stuff to us, guys. But we would say like oral culture, story culture.
yeah, like story focused culture,
Okay.
life story focused culture.
Story culture. Is there a better way to put that? Narrative culture. May not matter. Story culture. Examples in nature, maybe. It's like we use what is around us to teach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Interesting. Come on, guys, we're writing the textbook. Like I said, these are all PhD dissertations if anybody's interested, so. Yeah, cool stuff. Yeah,
I think in combination of humans being intrinsically spiritual and general revelation being just like so beautiful, there's a lot of room for us to distort things like we constantly do as humans. So, like, people being spiritual and like, when you kill an animal, there's like a difference, right? And that's not because like you're releasing this like spirit from the animal or anything like that. But some people might view it that way because death is death, right? And like it's programmed in the human brain when you see blood, like there's alarm bells going off. Oh, this is a serious thing.
yeah.
So like that in tandem with like, tell me when you look at the Grand Canyon or a beautiful forest, you aren't moved. Tell me when you hear a rhythm and beats, you aren't moved. Like we're programmed to enjoy these things, but because of they're not being like proper witnessing, like biblically or like things like that, simply just because of high barrier to entry culture and where people were living.
Yeah.
Like there's distortion of these things, right? It seems to be like they're still experiencing these things that God made, but because there's not like these bumpers on the bowling alley,
Sure.
they keep hitting gutter balls in a sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. I heard that. Yeah, maybe that's Immanuel Kant would have got into that quite a bit, or into that some. I'm not a Kantian expert, but I would describe it. I've heard it described this way as subjective universal experience. So it's a really useful phrase. So this is very subjective. All these things are subjective. It's like you can't measure ancestral worship. Like you can't weigh it. You can't. There's no empirical element really to it. It's not a materialistic thing. It's a spiritual thing, right? So yeah, I don't know what happens in the brain when you're getting jiggy with it, but I don't. So maybe something does. Maybe chemicals are released. Why are those chemicals released? Sure, evolutionary psychologists would probably have something to say about it. It's like just experiencing unity as a people, where we're doing the same thing. Our brains are networked. We're like at a dance, and I DJ'd your dance in that barn, guys. Like I saw you getting down. You were in one mind and one accord, like going for it, right? And there's something powerful about that. Is it something that we can measure? Not necessarily. These are subjective experiences. They're not objective experiences. They're subjective experiences, but they are subjectively universal, or universally subjective. That means that everybody has them, but you can't measure. It's like we don't know why we have these experiences. We don't know why we get the EBGBs when you're in a dark basement, like by yourself in a condemned building, but you do. You don't know why. What are some other examples? What are examples of things that are universal to being a human, but they're subjective experiences? Everybody has them as individuals, and they can't be measured. Okay? These are things that everybody experiences, but they're not things that we can measure.
That's awesome.
Okay? Maybe. Everybody experiences the emotions of death. There's a continuum, a spectrum of that, for sure, but experience the way that we experience loss. Okay, what else?
Like believing in higher power. Like even atheists still attribute some of their beliefs to the universe and such.
Yeah. We may use different language, but you look around everywhere, and most people, unless you've got a really good reason not to, or you've been told not to, you believe in a higher power. You believe in a creator, right? So as God presented himself in a way that can be measured to the satisfaction of scientists, not that I know of, not yet, and he may never choose to, because it's faith, right, at the end of the day, right? So, subjective universal experience. I'd say prayer, you could show me an atheist and they're about to get in a car crash and, oh God,
Yeah.
like, oh, help me. Higher power I don't believe in, please come help me right now, Anything else spring to mind?
Embarrassment? I don't know. Like people get embarrassed,
Okay.
but they don't. You can't measure that.
Yeah, that's true.
Or I might be misunderstanding what you're trying to get at with the question.
No, I think from a sociological standpoint, it's like embarrassment's stupid, but we all experience it.
Yeah.
It's like, what function does embarrassment serve socially for us?
It's going to bring up very similar seasonal celebration.
Seasonal celebrations, okay. Celebrating the solstice and equinox. That's very common across cultures. In our culture, we call it Christmas and Easter. I hate to break it to you guys. But,
Pagan.
and then you put up a pagan totem in your house. Some people call it a Christmas tree. Germanic pagan totem is literally what it is. So, do I care?
You ever draw a circle? Witchcraft, occultic.
No thanks. I'm not doing that. Nope. Not that kind of stuff. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there to monkey with you guys a little bit. There are experiences that what'd you miss, Teshar?
Who's the company one?
Poor guy. Watch the question marks at the end. We're not sure about those, but we think that they may be true. It's worth exploring. So, yeah, so there's something to, I think subjective universal is also the beauty, like Ivan was talking about. You go to the Grand Canyon, you stand there in awe. Is there anything that's measurable about that? No, but everybody stands there and it's like, holy smokes, you know? The stars in the sky, the beauty of that, the sense of overwhelm that you get if it's dark enough to see the Milky Way outside. You know? Those are subjective experiences, but most people have that. You know? I remember when I was a kid, I looked up in the sky and there was a comet. And it was present for a week and I just had a sense of dread. And all of a sudden I felt like a pagan. I connected with my pagan Celtic roots. And I was like, I bet some Irish dude 10,000 years ago, you know, was looking up and saw a comet and was like, that's probably bad. You know what I mean? Like, just signs and stuff, signs in nature, all that stuff, you know, we're attuned to that kind of thing. So yeah, I think when Ivan was mentioning beauty, it reminded me of that. Just like, yeah. And some of these things maybe over time and through maybe some of these experiences, you know, are the influence of the supernatural. All these things kind of maybe roll into one and say, if a culture, this is me just talking around here. Let's maybe put some things together. If a culture is in isolation to some degree and observing nature to a great degree, is understanding that there is something going on beyond the natural, right? And you experience subjective universal truths like beauty or sacrifice or different things like that, then maybe some of this animistic stuff, which does have parts of it that aligns with Christian truth, right? We believe in the spirit realm, right? We believe that we possess souls, that if we're saved, that our spirit man is raised to life. Yeah? Okay? So there's a spiritual element to it too. And that could over time lead to some of these elements of both Native American and West African spirituality you see here. So some of it's conjectural, like I said. I didn't grow up with either of these things, but as we think through it and what we know and what we see and what we've learned, maybe there's some truth to it too. So, yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Do you have your I've written down like your names for the build a cult stuff? So, yeah, good. Imani, do you want to say anything? You sure?